Hello, YouTubers out there. This is Rey Saravia at the movies. Normally, I don't discuss upcoming films that are being released or being considered or whatever. Uh, last one I did was The Exorcist Believer, which I talked about over a month and a half ago, and I think I discussed over a year ago the fact that this was coming out of Blumhouse Productions and all this stuff. Okay, so um, sometimes I'll talk about a trailer, which I don't mind doing, even though I don't do trailer reactions. But in this case, I thought maybe I should talk a little bit about this. And this was the announcement made. And again, this actually has been sort of long standing for the last couple of years, I think. They've been talking about making more Star Wars movies. One of them, I think, was Rogue Squadron, which would have been a sequel or something of that nature to Rogue One, the Star Wars story. So the last Star Wars film that we've had was The Rise of Skywalker, which ended the Skywalker saga not very satisfactorily, uh, to my not bitter disappointment. I mean, I thought actually the movie was not bad at all, but it wasn't the most satisfying way to end the Skywalker saga. Nevertheless, that was back in 2019. And there are haters of that movie and some that like it. I don't know if anyone really loves that movie. But anyway, leaving that aside, three Star Wars films have been announced. And whether these are final, I don't know. But I thought maybe I should talk about them a little bit because I used to be a major Star Wars fan. And that was going way back, 40 years ago. So before I divulge a little bit more about that, which I've talked about before, let's talk about the three Star Wars films. This is part of a new, I guess, trilogy, but it's not clear, or if it's just individual Star Wars pictures, which is pretty much what it sounds like. So the first one is by James Mangold, and this one will be a prequel that's set 25,000 years before Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, or to the rest of us who are in that age group, Star Wars from 1977, when it was just called Star Wars. And it will be about the discovery of the Force and sort of like a Ten Commandments of Star Wars. That one sounds ambitious. Um, Prequels, is a very curious thing because sometimes they just don't work. Sometimes we don't really need them. I don't know how important it is to have a young Wonka, but the movie looks delightful. Whether it's good or not, who knows? But there have been way too many prequels lately, and that seems to have become a thing. Hunger Games also, although that was, of course, based on a book. Anyway, that was one of them. The other one is by Dave Filoni, and it's sort of dealing with ingredients or certain aspects or interconnected stories from The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and other Disney Plus series. Okay. I guess they will deal a little bit with Grogu, perhaps. I don't know. I guess we'll see about that one. That one probably sounds the least ambitious. Now, the other one is by a filmmaker who I'm not really that aware of, Charmeen Obaid-Chinoy. And she is a Pakistani-Canadian journalist, filmmaker, and activist known for her work in films that highlight gender inequality against women. So I guess that's the one that we picked to do a Star Wars movie. It's kind of strange. I'm not fully familiar with her. She's done documentaries, but she also worked on Miss Marvel, which I haven't looked at. And she has received 2 Academy Awards, 7 Emmy Awards. All right, I mean, that's fine. Is that the person that you want to do a Star Wars picture? Who knows? But anyway, this one will have the return of Rey, played by Daisy Ridley. And it is set 15 years after Rise of Skywalker. And I guess she is going to be working on a new Jedi Order. Now, Rey is a character I don't really mind, but it seems like it's still too soon to do a story that's set 15 years after. In other words, I think the best thing you can do with Star Wars for the time being, because I have a feeling they lost quite a few fans, is to just let this go for the time being. Let it rest. Disney has a lot of money. Why not come up with original stories that have nothing to do with Star Wars, nothing to do with Marvel? Just and and they are doing those, but let's let go of these franchises for the time being. Let them rest for a while. And the reason I say that is because when you think back between Return of the Jedi, which closed out the original trilogy by George Lucas, and Star Wars Phantom Menace, which came out 16 years later. In between, we had a couple of Ewok adventure movies shown on TV. Um, and, and then when he did his prequel trilogy, 10 years uh, was the gap between Revenge of the Sith and Star Wars The Force Awakens. So now it's going to be roughly 6-7 years for a new Star Wars picture, at least with Rey. I would say, you know what, let this just put it to bed for now. Let it go for now. Just let it go. The reason I say that is because there's too much Star Wars. There's really way too much out there. I came from a time where you had to wait 3 years for a new Star Wars movie. That was the case with Star Wars, then The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, each one 3 years in between. After Return of the Jedi, Star Wars sort of fell out of favor for me. I mean, I was 12 years old when I saw that. I was kind of disappointed in Return of the Jedi. It wasn't nearly... I mean, it's technically a good Star Wars movie. It's not a great one. Empire, to me, even after all the Star Wars that I've seen, is the best. Period. It's also one of the greatest movies ever made, I think. As far as fantasy, sci-fi, adventure. Of course, Harlan Ellison would disagree, but he's no longer around, that it's sci-fi. But if you want to call it pure fantasy set in outer space, that's what it is. It's Flash Gordon for adults and kids, but mostly for kids. Star Wars has always been for kids, really. But it can also appeal to kid and all of us who are adults or my age. But the thing is that after that, I kind of just, that was enough Star Wars. 3 movies were enough. And, I have no problems with the prequels. I have no problems really with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, although Rise of Skywalker was not quite what I had hoped for. But, these movies don't ruin my childhood because my childhood was separate from these movies. I mean, it was part of it, but it didn't inform it. It didn't inform my childhood. So when people complain about more Star Wars series, I just say to myself, well, don't watch them. Star Wars is not going to be ruined because you don't like, for example, what's upcoming, The Acolyte, which I've talked about, or a new Rey movie. I mean, you don't have to see them. It's okay. Is there too much of it? Yes, there's way too much. Sometimes you can have too much of a good thing, but in this case, we're having too much of a slightly fair thing. In other words, Mandalorian Season 3, I'm going to finish watching because I have vacation time coming, so I'll finish watching it. I think I have about 4 episodes left. But it didn't involve me the same way as the first 2 seasons. I think I can speak for others that it did the same thing. Not that we all have to agree on the same thing. Now, I did enjoy the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and I'm sure that that was considered, that hindered anyone's enjoyment of Star Wars. I don't know why. I liked it. It was fine. I mean, some of the episodes were very good. Not all of it was fantastic, but oh well. It's a series. I mean, anytime you have a TV series, not every episode is going to be great. And I just, I haven't checked out Ahsoka. I mean, I might look at it, but it's just not on my radar. Star Wars just doesn't appeal to me the same way it did 40 years ago. Even when I saw the prequels, and even though I had excitement about The Force Awakens because I like the idea of bringing back Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, and even though their denouements were not the greatest, it was still part of the series. I didn't feel like it ruined anything for me. But for some people, you can only take this so far, and maybe they just took it too far. So I would say let these projects slide for now. Give it some time. Give it some rest. No more Star Wars stuff for now. But Disney is bankrolling this stuff, and Marvel. I mean, there's way too much Marvel. Do you know the last Marvel movie I saw? Um, Geez, I think it was, well, leaving aside the Guardians of the Galaxy, which I've seen all three of those, really, in as far as the Avengers are concerned overall, was Age of Ultron. And that came out 9 years ago. So I haven't really caught up with this stuff because after a while, I mean, I just kind of got tired of it. I didn't feel like, I'm not that huge a fan of that stuff. Although I do love Spider Man. But I guess my point is that, there's just too much of this. There's way too much. But those are just my thoughts, of course. Some of you may disagree. It's just the way I feel. So I can't say I'm really excited about a new series of movies. Clearly, they're trying for something different, which is fine. Uh, Bringing back Rey, well, I liked her character. I don't mind the fact that her last name is now Skywalker. She chose it. So, some people, that was like the greatest offense in the history of Star Wars, which I mean, there were things even in Rise Skywalker I didn't quite understand. But, you know, I've talked about that in a review of that movie in the past. So I won't reiterate. But anyway, let me your thoughts. Tell me what you think. And not if there's too much Star Wars, because I think some of you, I would know what your answer would be to that. But rather, can we let Star Wars rest in peace for the time being? Might be a good idea. Just let it go for now. As far as Marvel is concerned, that's not what we're talking about. But typically, Star Wars, just let bygones be bygones for the time being. Um, it's usually a good idea to build anticipation. And when you have 3 or 4 new Star Wars series coming out, it's hard to feel that much excitement anymore over this. I mean, nobody anticipates that much. You know what I mean? I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. Lend me yours. Tell me what you think. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe if you enjoy what you hear. If you don't like it, okay, that's fine. But I hope maybe some of you will still subscribe and see what else I have to offer. I guess that's about it. If you are already a subscriber, thank you. And please hit that notification bell for future uploads. And that's all I got to say about that. This is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.